Hi guys, in this video I'm gonna teach you a method which I use to fetch last row and last column that always works, and that method is data range. As you can see in the code, what I do is I use data range method provided by the app script to fetch all the data in a sheet. After doing that, I use length method to fetch last row of the spreadsheet, and then I use the length of one of the rows inside of that data to fetch the value for the last column. So it always works for me. And another thing I would like to tell is that whenever you use this method, use this process to fetch last row and last column, is that you do not waste any codes. You do not have to go to any extra length to get the values for this data, because you always have to fetch the spreadsheet no matter what you're doing whenever you use Google Apps Script. And then you always have to fetch a sheet as well, because if you're manipulating any spreadsheet, then you're going to have to fetch the spreadsheet itself and then the sheet which you want to find the value of the last row and last column in that sheet. And then you can just use the length method provided by the JavaScript for the arrays to get the last row and the last column for that sheet. And there's a caveat, of course, which is you're going to have to remember that the last row is not necessarily equal to the number of non-empty rows. What I mean that, as you can see in the spreadsheet, the data range includes all the rows and columns which might be empty, but which comes before the actual last row and the last column. What I mean is, if there is a column or a row which are empty, which are blank, and in between the data, in between the rows, or during the starting of the spreadsheet, as you can see in the spreadsheet here, then the data range will also include those rows and those sheets. So you're going to have to be careful with the technicalities that the last row and the last column we fetch using this method is not necessarily equal to the number of non-empty rows or columns. And there's another thing when we use data types like checkbox. So as you can see in this spreadsheet, and whenever we assign checkboxes to a column, then the values are filled to all the rows we selected. And the thing about checkboxes is, if they are not checked, then they are not necessarily empty. They're just false when we are fetching the data in the app script. So the data range also extracts all the rows in the spreadsheet which have checkboxes that are even empty or that are never touched. So in those cases, to overcome this, simplest method is just assigning checkboxes in the rows which are already filled. If you cannot do that, it's quite a manual process to assign and remove checkboxes whenever you edit the rows. So what you can do is you can separate the spreadsheet team, one for your team who are not necessarily coders or anybody who uses that sheet for collaboration, and another sheet which will be an exact copy of that sheet which will be used by the app script. And in that sheet which will be used by the app script, you can remove the checkboxes and then fill the values by either yes for the checked checkboxes and then empty for the no's. And in that way, the data range will only fetch the rows and columns that have either yes values, or at least that have values other than the checkboxes themselves. So that is one of the ways to overcome the checkboxes dilemma. And yeah, this is the method I use in all my projects to fetch the last row and the last column whenever I need them. So It's very simple. You don't have to go to any extra length for that. Of course, there are circumstances like checkboxes. Then I'm going to have to use some extra ways or steps to overcome that method. But generally, when we use data range, we can easily fetch last row and the last column in that spreadsheet. Okay, so thank you for watching. I hope this was an informative video for you. So in the comment section, I would like you to comment any other method which you use to fetch the last row and the last column in a spreadsheet. Thank you.